Hey, welcome to another episode of Article Read Through with Ashley from acejapanese.com. You can see my website here. On my website, you can find weekly blogs talking about Japanese language, generally grammar or kanji. Sometimes I do an article breakdown like you can see in front of you. I'll also post all my YouTube videos on there, and you can also find my contact information. So if you want to book lessons with me that we do online through Zoom. Finally, I've got a resources tab with some really useful websites that you can check out to help improve your Japanese. So today we're going to be looking at this article from Yahoo News. It's basically talking about kanji for children at school, and particularly about how they mark kanji. So should you be giving 0 marks for a kanji that's not drawn properly or things like that, particularly in the case of quite young children. In this article, it does talk about primary school aged children. Now, basically because this article is aimed at native speakers, it's pretty tricky. Just the vocab and kanji alone is, I would say, N1. Grammar's not too bad. There's a few kind of high level grammar points in here, but overall, I think if your grammar was at about an N3 or an N2 level, you should be able to read this. As always with these articles, it's going to be the kanji and the vocab. Now, I'm not going to read through this entire article. I'm just going to go through it line by line, and we're going to explain the grammar and kanji and vocab as we go along. I've got a bit of a favor to ask. If you're watching this video and you found it at all useful, I'd really appreciate a like on the video, a subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit that bell to get notifications. All those things really help out the YouTube channel, and really it's your way of telling me what content you like. So if you like it, comment, subscribe to the channel. Those types of videos are what I'll put out more. And if it's something you don't like, well, leave me a comment, tell me what you would like to see. So first we've got 0点は厳しすぎ, and sugi is just our sugiru style grammar point. So we take our adjective in this case, drop the e and add sugiru or sugi to make it more into a noun. So 0 marks is too strict or too harsh. Shōichi. Now this is a kind of a contraction. We're dealing with a headline here. It's really shogaku ichinensei, right? So a first year primary school student. We've got these 3 words which are going to come up a bit in this article: tome, hane, harai. When you're using a brush or whatever, but the kind of traditional shuji techniques where you flick or do round strokes or things like that, and it's basically part of calligraphy. I'm not very good at these, by the way, but you learn them in Japanese school. For example, if you look at this picture, you can see that there's been pink circles which have been drawn on things. So you can see there's a little, it's very hard to see, but there is a little tick that this student has written on the end of this kanji, which is 10. And it's kind of blurry here, but it's kind of hard for me to draw the kanji with the mouse. But the first line should really be a straight line, and there shouldn't be any flick on the end. All right, so generally here, this would be referred to as a tome, all right? When you're drawing, you're stopping the pen or brush or whatever at the end. And this person, you can see, has done a bit of a flick. So you're not allowed to do that with certain characters. And you can see in the correct answer that's been given here, you can see it's kind of blurry, but it's a straight line here. So that's what they're talking about with these 3. I would just recommend you look them up to learn what they are. I've put a bit of a very brief explanation on my website, which I showed earlier, but we got de batsu, and batsu is wrong, right? So basically we've got an X, and here we got a triangle, which is kind of like a half mark, but we're getting X's from basically not doing tome, hane, harai correctly. Now this is an abbreviation of MEXT, which is the Japanese name for this is Monbu Kagakusho, which is the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, something like that, but basically the Department of Education. No kenkai wa, and kenkai is a view. Okay, so we kind of have these teachers who are doing certain things, and then people are complaining about them, and so now the department, the MEXT, is kind of saying, well, this is our like official view on the situation. It's worth looking at this picture before we really get into the article. So we see it says 学年別漢字配当表とはトメなどが異なるため減点された小学1年生の漢字プリント. Alright, well, kanji printo is this sheet, right? It's kind of like a worksheet for kanji. And we see there's been a few alterations in pink here. So this kanji is aoi, And the bottom part, what they're trying to show here is that this bottom part of this kanji, which you can kind of read as tsuki, it means moon, it's supposed to have a right angle at the top. It's supposed to be square on the top. Whereas this one, they have, but the problem is that because this right hand stroke, basically where this pink line is, it's actually all one stroke. It's very easy to round off the edge like that. The left hand side, it won't generally happen because you draw the left hand side stroke straight down and then you do the kind of right angle coming off the point of the tsuki. But the tendency is, especially when you're using a pencil or whatever, that you tend to round off that edge, and technically you're not supposed to have these round edges. It's supposed to be square. So that's what they've pointed out there. This one I already talked about, the tome, and this one, well, they're circling it because this line actually has to be joined where the intersection of all those other lines are. So you do these two horizontals, and then you do this stroke down here, and then that stroke down there. So what you're supposed to do is really, the stroke has to start there. There can't be a gap like is being shown here. And again, it's kind of blurry, but you can see that it's all kind of starting there. So that kind of stuff is what they're talking about. And this is the gen 10, all right? So they're basically removing marks for not doing stuff like tome, not stopping the stroke properly, and koto naru, and saying, because it's different from the example given to the student originally. Now, shuji no yona, well, shuji really refers to penmanship. So it's the ability to kind of use some tool, a brush or a pen to create kanji. And there are certain things which are expected in shuji, particularly with kanji tome, hane, and harai. Right, all these things you need to be able to do them. So things like this, which come in shuji, ga dekite inai to. All right, so dekite inai to, we're seeing our te form here plus inai. So it's like our progressive tense, but in the negative. And it's like, well, if you can't do these things, right? Because the to here is our conditional. Kanji doriru wa subete yari naoshi. All right, you have to do redo all of the kanji drills. And there can be a lot of these, by the way. There's a good video by Sanbon Juku where he talks about what it's like to learn kanji as a Japanese person in Japan. And he talks about how, well, basically, Juku in particular will just give you, the teacher will say something like, okay, you must do 100 repetitions of this kanji and then 100 repetitions of this kanji, right? And it takes forever. So if you've got to do them all over again, it's going to take even longer. According to the penmanship rules, well, you have to do it all again. Test wa 0点, and then you get 0 on the test. 小学1年の担任のこうした指導に対し. Now, a tannin is a type of leader of some description, kind of like the teacher who is in charge. Now, it's kind of used in two different ways in Japan. So the tannin sensei is generally the home group teacher, all right? So it's the teacher you have first period every morning, well, really before first period. They kind of go through housekeeping and they're kind of your form teacher, your home group teacher. There's various words for that. But here we're talking about primary school, and you don't really have a form group teacher for primary school in Japan, not in Australia either, but whatever. But you don't have this kind of teacher. But really what it means is the teacher in charge. Okay, so you've got a teacher who is running the kanji class, all right? Now, it could be just like their normal teacher, but it might be a special teacher. But we don't really know from this. But basically, it's talking about the teacher in charge, like basically the teacher whose duty it is to run the class. Then ko shita, well, when we take ko, saw, and these types of words and put them in front of a verb, it's really like do the verb this way, do the verb that way. So ko shita, and shido is a type of guidance or direction. Okay? Ni taishi. Now, this is really tai suru. It's kind of kaki kotoba, written Japanese. But in regards to the directions given this way of the teacher running the class, hogosho kara. Now, hogosha is a type of guardian, but here it's referring to the parents or pretty much whoever's looking after the child, a guardian, really. But the person whose primary care is of the child. So from the parents or guardians, kibishi sugiru, right? So now we see this is from the headline earlier, but now we've got it in the verb form, I guess. So they're saying, toyu nayami ga tadoita. Now, I talked about this in my article, but todoita is to arrive, todoku. And nayami is a type of trouble or worry about something. So these worries have arrived. And toyu. Now, what this is really meaning is it's trying to create a general concept, toyu. Tae Kim has a good page on this, which I would recommend. It's called Defining and Describing, I think. But toyu is used to talk about a general concept. So it's not like every single parent or guardian or whatever went to this reporter or whoever it may be and said, kibishi sugiru, right? They might have said the same thing, but in slightly different terms. You know, they might have been longer, more verbose, whatever. But in the end, their kind of meaning of what they're trying to say is, hey, this teacher's being too strict, right? Kibishi sugiru. So this kind of trouble or problem was, or worry was kind of constantly coming and arriving to, you know, basically they were telling this person about this. Wagako no shugaku o mae ni. Now, shugaku is really entering into school. So we're talking about kids who are, you know, young. They might have gone to like yochien or stuff like that. But really, there's a time when kids are not going to school and then they enter into the school system at some point. But the idea is obviously that you're supposed to teach your kids something before sending them to school. And in Japan, hiragana, katakana, kanji, these are some things which are taught to kids before they enter into school. So shugaku o mae ni, so before they get into the school or are put into the school system, doko made teine ni ji o kakaseru beki ka? Now, doko made is like up until where, right? So up until what point in this situation? Teine ni, and teine means polite, but it also means to do something properly as well. So ji o kakaseru beki. Now, beki is a very strong word of should, and it's kind of like a moral should in a lot of situations. And kakaseru is really to make someone do something, like to kind of force them to do something. So the idea is, you know, how far should we go as parents, make the kids write neatly, okay? I mean, they're kind of new to the whole kanji thing, so how harsh should you be on them? And then shian shiteiru hogosha wa oi hazu. All right, and shian shiteiru is really discussing things, having a conversation about it. So basically, there's an oi hazu, you know, supposed to be a lot. So this article is really pointing out that, look, a lot of parents do take this seriously, right? They think about it and go, how far should we teach our kids? I mean, the school system has to do something, but what should we be teaching our kids? How you know, should we really be emphasizing the tome, hane, harai kind of stuff? All right, so now we have Nishi Nihon Shimbun, so just the name of the newspaper that kind of did this article originally. Anata no tokume shuzai han. Now this is really just a type of fact-finding team, and tokume is a type of mission, right? So tokume shuzai han, like fact-finding mission. Ga website de iken o tsunotta tokoro. Okay, and now iken o tsunoru is to ask people for opinions. Website today. All right, so obviously they put up some poll or some contact form or something in order that you can go, hey, this is my experience with my kids, whatever. So hogosha ya kyoiku genba kara. All right, so hogosha, obviously talk about that's the parents. Ya is our kind of incomplete list, so we're talking about many things. And kyoiku genba. So kyoiku genba, well, the genba is like the actual place where something happens, and kyoiku is education. So kyoiku genba is kind of like the front lines, right? It's like the teachers, maybe people who help do the curriculum or something like that. But we're talking about people in the field, right? Experts or whatever. Kara samazama na koe ga todoita, right? So we see this word todoita again, and samazama is various. So various voices were heard, right? People gave in all their opinions. And we got jitai, which is kind of an important word to understand for this article, but jitai is really talking about this. It's the composition of characters. And for example, one important thing with jitai is you see that there's these squares. And technically, when you write kanji, you're supposed to try and fill the square evenly. And this applies to hiragana and katakana also. So it can mean if you've got a simple hiragana like I, okay, it's pretty easy to fit in the box. But when you start getting more complicated kanji, you've got to be really good at kind of making some bits small and bits in proportion so that it still fits in that same box. And that's kind of what jitai is. It also refers to tome, hane, and harai because that's obviously part of composition as well. But it's the totality of writing kanji properly. So 自体の指導は so as for the guidance on 自体どこまで厳格であるべきか Now 厳格 we can see it's the same kanji for 厳しい again this is not the word I would remember for the onyomi of this to be honest I would recommend genkin This is probably a bit of a more useful word you see, which means like a strict prohibition against something. But whatever. Genkaku is really just a various version of kibishi. It just means strict or harsh. All right. So, dokomade genkaku dearu beki ka. So basically, again, we got our beki here, and the ka is our little rhetorical question. So, how strict should you be when you're talking about teaching people about composition of characters. All right, so we've got a bit of a subheading here. 習っていないのとして省くのは違う. Now we're going to see this quote in a little bit more detail in the actual paragraph a bit later. But we've got a noto, so we've got a bit of a comparison here. So 習っていない. So hasn't been learnt. Again, it's kind of like how much should the teachers teach? How much should the parents teach, particularly before they get into school? And then して省く. So knowing it and leaving it out. No wa chiga. So we've got kind of nominalizers for both here. But we're saying there's a difference between not learning something or not having learned something or knowing it and leaving it out. Now, there's a big difference between, writing kanji that are supposed to be like properly formed and perfect and all these kinds of things, particularly if you're getting marked on your penmanship, versus how do you actually use kanji in real life. There are some crazy simplified versions of kanji in Japan that sometimes you look at them, you can't even recognize what the kanji is anymore. But they're trying to point out, well, there's a difference between these two. If they're just kind of leaving things out, they know it, but they just leave it out. Well, that's different from not knowing it. And, you got to be careful what you're penalizing if that's the case. So, 同じタイプの厳しい先生がいたが. All right, so, がいた. So, this person, we can see this is a quote. They kept saying, well, I had this kind of strict style teacher when I was in school, whoever this person speaking is. 数年後は皆さん感謝していた. Now, 感謝 is grateful, okay? So, 数年後, a few years later, several years later, whatever, 皆さん感謝していた. So everyone was very grateful, okay? And this is kind of the balance you have to strike, right? Having these strict teachers will teach you a lot of things which might be painful at the time, but if you get into these habits early with kanji, it's way better than having to fix bad habits later, because it can be really hard to break bad kanji habits later. So that's one person's opinion, and obviously these are the things that were given into the website. Someone else has said, 高校生や大学生の指導をしているが. All right, so this person obviously is some kind of tutor, like a kate kyoshi, or maybe they're a teacher or something. So, and they're tutoring or whatever of high school students and university students. So they're doing this, but 字が雑で読めないことがある. Now, zatsu is a word that's going to come up a little bit in this article, but it means to be either messy or sloppy. In this situation. It's got some other meanings as well, like miscellaneous and stuff, but that's not here. So zatsu de. So jiga zatsu. So the kanji is so messy. Yomenai koto ga aru. So there were times that I couldn't read. Now this is obviously a problem if you're trying to write an answer to some question or something, but then the teacher can't read your characters. Well, you're going to have a hard time getting marks for that. So this is obviously the other problem if you don't learn kanji properly. And, by the time you get to kokosei, daigakusei, it's been, 12 plus years of formal schooling at that point, right? You're probably not going to be able to break those habits very easily. 大学教員として国語の入試の採点をした. Now, 採点 is marking papers, and 入試 is it's a contraction for the entrance examination, and 国語 is it's the equivalent of doing Japanese in Japan, right? It's the native language, native speaker version of Japanese. So not like what we do, which is like JSL, Japanese is a second language, but the actual school subject of Japanese, just like we do English in school here in Australia, it's called kokugo. This is, again, a bit of a contraction, but it's pretty much always said like this. And daigaku kyoin, well, I guess this would be a type of professor, adjunct or something. Yeah, faculty member. All right. So this person did this job, right? Marking papers. Tome ga hane ni natteru bai. All right. So this is a very common one. A tome is a stop and a hane is a flick. So if you do the wrong one, so ni natteru bai, so situations where the tome has become a hane, ya, and then other situations, zatsu de hanbetsu ga muzukashii mo fuseikai. All right. So this is kind of the problem we're getting at. Zatsu de because it's messy. Hanbetsu is to discriminate things, okay? So it starts becoming hard to tell one character from another. Muzukashii mo. So there are some kanji which are very similar looking. And yeah, if you don't get the hane or tome, whatever, correct, it can look like the wrong one. And then technically it's a wrong answer, even though you kind of know it's like, oh, they probably meant to write this, but they didn't write it. They wrote a different character. So fuseikai. So this is our negativing prefix. So seikai is correct, fuseikai incorrect. So they're kind of like, well, if you've got the tome and hane mixed up, or if it's just messy and you can't tell similar looking kanji apart from each other, you know, both of these situations, fuseikai, they have to be marked as incorrect. Now, this says boto no kyoshi. Now, boto means kind of the beginning or the previous. So this is referring to that picture we saw with the circles on it, correcting the orange circles and stuff. No shiro ni sando suru tachiba kara wa. Tachiba is a type of position or point of view. So from the position of agreeing with the guidance of the teacher given at the outset, こうした投稿が寄せられた. Now, こうした, again, we just had that. 投稿 is a post, all right? So we can kind of say that the things that were submitted to the website, people's opinions were posts. And then 寄せられた, these kind of posts came in. 中には, so amongst these, 止め、はね、払いが不完全な字に丸をつけた谷に. So amongst these ones, 不完全な字, so, and if you're missing strokes or leaving gaps when you shouldn't be, that's not really a kanzen character. So 不完全, so characters which were not completed, basically to the teacher in charge who put circles around the incorrect or incomplete characters. 小学生は基本が重要. Now, 重要 is like vitally important, really important, and kihon is the basics or the fundamentals. So 小学生, the primary school students, as for them, fundamentals are the most important. 習っていない. So whether or not they've learnt it, のとして省くのでは, or they know it and have left it out, 意味が違う. There's a big difference, okay? Of course. It's okay if you just leave things out if you know that you should use them. But if you don't know them at all and you're getting marked down for them, well, that's worse, really. などと訴え. All right, so they kind of pleaded this. They kind of said this. 指導を変えさせたという保護者も. 指導を変えさせた. Now, 変えさせた is the causative and the past. And so there are guardians or parents or whatever who are saying, well, we need to kind of force a reform of the guidance, right? We need to make sure we're giving the right guidance to the kids. All right, next one we got Kita Kyushu sheep. So this Kyushu, well, Kita Kyushu is a part of Kyushu. It's the northern end of Kyushu, and Shi is a city, so it's like northern Kyushu city. の小学校に30年勤務した教員は. So teaching staff who have served at this primary school in Kita Kyushu city for 30 years. 採点の裁量は各谷にあるため. 採点の裁量, a little bit tricky. 裁量 is a type of discretion or a judgment. So 採点の裁量, the discretion of like awarding marks は各谷にあるため. Now, 谷 we had before, this is our teacher in charge. And kaku means each. Right? It's a prefix you can put on lots of different kanji. So the discretion of giving marks is kind of, because it's up to each teacher, aru tame, due to the fact that it's being up to each teacher. All right. Samo umareru to shita uede. So amongst the classes, right, you're going to have differences arise, okay, just by virtue of them being different kids in the class, different levels, and because also the teachers have discretion with awarding the marks. 教えた通り書けていない場合は減点詞。Okay, so 教えた通り. Now, something 通り, a verb with 通り is kind of continuing in that way. So this person's kind of saying, well, I taught them a certain way. And 書けていない, if they can't, right? This is the potential here, the negative potential. But if they can't write it the way I have taught them, right? So I teach them one way and they have to write it that way. By what? So in the situation where they haven't written it as they have been specifically taught, 減点値, I'll subtract marks. 0点にはしなかった. And I wouldn't give them 0. Okay, so this is kind of pushing back against the original teacher who seems to just give 0 if you don't do it exactly as they say. This person is just saying 減点. Okay, so I take marks off, but I'm not just going to give you 0 for the entire thing. That's kind of ridiculous, this person is saying. と自らの体験を紹介した. So this person is kind of introducing, or it's not introducing, but they're bringing up their own experiences, as a teacher of 30 years. So we have this どこまで減点 again, どこまで until what point, 文科省各校の判断, right? So now we see that the Department of Education is kind of stepping into it and saying, well, 各校, so every school or each school, no 判断. It's up to the judgment of every school, of course, right? You don't want to have this centralized thing. It's kind of unwieldy, but you got to kind of give the teachers some leeway here. So 一方で, so on the other hand, 福岡県の小学校教員は, so as for primary school teaching instructors in 福岡, ともはらを基準に減点することは. Now, 基準, similar to this word 基本, but 基準 is a standard. And 基準に減点することは, so as for taking marks off for the standard of these three things, now we see it says 誤りだと投稿した. Now, 誤り is a mistake, all right? So we see we've got a bit of a difference in philosophical outlook here. So it's a mistake. This is what they posted. 根拠とするのは. Now, 根拠 is like evidence or basis for something, right? So we're kind of like, well, if we're going to have this standard for taking marks off, where are you going to get this standard from? And we see we've got 学習指導要領解説の国語編だ. All right, so we have an actual official document which tells us about what is the correct and incorrect way to write kanji. So this is the standard that you can relate it to. 実態は骨組み. All right, now 骨組み is like the framework of something, the structure of something. であるため, all right, so composition is really at the heart of it. 実際に書かれた場合は, so when you actually write these characters in reality, 無数の形状があり, there are many ways to write characters in certain ways. There's many, for example, there's many styles of calligraphy and stuff like that as well. But there are many forms or functions and basically infinite ways that a character can be written. All right, so we see what is the standard that this one goes by? Well, 正しい事態であることを前提とした上で. So basically, 前提 is to presume something. Now, とした上で is a bit of a JLPT grammar point, but basically, having presumed that it is the correct composition, 柔軟に評価する. Now, 柔軟 is like softly, kind of like flexibly or something. And it's being an adverb here. And 評価する is to criticize or judge something. することが望ましい. Now, 望ましい is to kind of wish for something or to be desirable. Saying, well, the desirable thing is that you should kind of not be too harsh on judging people's kanji and kind of go, well, if it's kind of really close to something, like, for example, that example of Aoi in that picture, like, it's like you're really going to ping a person because they rounded the character a bit. I mean, that's how most Japanese people would write the character, especially if they're writing quickly. You're not going to spend the time to really make that like a 90-degree right angle. If you're doing the kanji for certain ceremonial purposes or for calligraphy, okay, that's a little bit different, but because they didn't have you didn't get your protractor out and measure a 90-degree thing. So that's this person obviously has a bit of a softer approach to teaching kanji composition. だが、but 文部科学省教育課程科の見解は異なる。All right, so now we see kind of a problem because, okay, this teacher may have this opinion, this Fukuoka teacher may have this opinion. And here we see the problem, right? So, kokugo de wa naku. So basically, if it's not in kokugo, because in kokugo, you are kind of expected to take the time to write the characters properly. But we got shakai ya rika. All right, so shakai is like social studies kind of subjects, humanities. And rika is science subjects, nado. Takyoka. So in other subjects, so apart from kokugo, in all the other subjects, de kaita jiwa, so the characters you write in these things, tome hane harai ga dekite nai kara toite. So if you say that you haven't done tome hane harai properly, or you haven't done it at all, genten wa shinai, all right? Don't take marks off for this, all right? In kokugo you can, it seems like, but in the other subjects, it's not really the focus of the subject. It's more like, okay, have you answered the question about physics or whatever? で、柔軟な評価を意味する. Right? So basically, be soft with your criticism, okay, in these situations. と説明する. This is what the MEXT explains. 学習指導要領には, now this is the curriculum again, には漢字の指導においては, so in regards to the kind of guidance you should give with kanji. So we're going to see this word here, the 学年別漢字配当表. And I can see it just as a list of kanji by school year. So this is it's arranged by, in first year, there's I'd say about 80 or so. There's about 100 per year of kanji, and then it starts to go up a bit. This is the progression that most Japanese kids will follow. I really wouldn't recommend you follow this progression of kanji too closely if you're a non-native speaker of Japanese. I would recommend you follow a kanji damage style system. I've done videos on this before. You can check them up above. But basically, you've got this list of progression that Japanese kids will normally follow. Ni shimesu kanji, right? So basically, how the kanji is shown in this kanji progression book, or hyojun tosuru, right? Follow the guidelines per that, okay? So how it's written in the official kanji books, do that. Don't really do anything else. Toari. Kanji testo, so kanji test, ya. Shoshade, so this is similar to shuji, it's just penmanship, right? Really testing, can you write the characters properly? Dewa, hai tohyo. Now, hai tohyo is again in this kanji list. How is it shown? How is it written in that way? And again, we see our tori again. So basically, per the pictures, right? Per the materials that you get, no tome hane harai ga motomerareru toyu, right? So this is the thing that they're looking for, right? This is what they really want you to do. They're searching, when they're looking at your work and trying to say, have you done it right or not? They're really looking for, well, does it really reflect the official pictures of how the kanji should look? Tada, however, 実際にどこまで減点するかどうかは So how far do you go in reality to actually deduct marks if it's kind of differing from the picture? I don't like this word picture, but the diagram, the official kind of diagram. は各校の判断と付け加えた. So they're really saying, well, yeah, but there's got to be some discretion given to the teachers who actually have to mark it, right? You don't have to send all your kanji homework into some MEXT official and go, oh, yes, this should be 0, this shouldn't be 0. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. So they're kind of saying, well, of course, we're going to allow some leeway for the teachers to kind of decide, well, how many marks are they going to take off for not following the picture properly? So, kaku koto ga kirai. So, I hate writing kanji. Ni naru koto wa kenen. Now, kenen is like a concern or a worry. So they're kind of saying like, take concern or be concerned that it could be that kids will just start to hate writing kanji, if you're too harsh, for example. So ippo again, on the other hand, shochu gakko ni naganen kimu shita. Right, so someone who's worked for a long time in primary and middle schools. Here we've got a name. It's this guy here, and we can see it's Hirashima Kazuomi. And we can see, obviously, this is his shozoku, this is his affiliation, basically the school he belongs to. And we can see, this is in the article as well, but he's a kyakuin kyoju, right, a visiting professor. And this is kind of his speciality. It's language expression, I guess. It's his speciality in kokugo. Well, 厳しい指導で, so if you're harsh with your guidance, 書くことが嫌いになることを懸念する, right? So it's just the headline here, little subheading here. So they're going to hate. You got to be careful. You got to have a concern that you're going to make people hate writing kanji if you're strict like this. 鉛筆をうまく扱うには. Right now, 扱う is to kind of handle something, and it's a pencil technically here, but it's kind of referring to any kind of brush as well. So in order to use the pencil well, 指の筋肉が動作を覚えるような地道な練習が必要だ。だからだ。Right, so だからだ because 地道な練習 is a type of like boring practice, right? And this is really what kanji stuff is. It's lots of boring stuff. が必要, but it's necessary. And 指の筋肉, so the finger muscles, whatever, が動作, and this is the movement really of the pencil, を覚えるような. So in order for it to remember, you need to do all this kind of fundamental, basic, boring work. I don't particularly agree with this. I see the point, but I think this is a little bit overblown in my humble opinion. 冒頭の保護者も, so the previous like guardians or parents, whoever, who were mentioned in the beginning of the article, 小一の子供のやる気. All right, now the やる気 is motivation, right? Will to do something. So these first year primary school kids, motivation が損なわれている. Now, soko now is the plain form of this verb, which means to lose something, or to be reduced or whatever. And this is the passive form. So they're kind of saying, well, ことを気にしていた. So these parents are kind of looking at their kids like, man, they're really unmotivated to do things like this, right? Write kanji. And they're kind of saying, well, it's because the teachers are being strict on them. And they've noticed it, right? It's been such a big decline that they've actually noticed it with their own kids. So here we have a reference to Yorchien. This is our basically pre-primary, right? Kindergarten or whatever. But Yorchien ya shouchu gakko de. So in these various school settings, primary school, pre-primary, primary, and middle school, de shono demae jugyo. Now, shono demae, sho is another word for calligraphy. And demae is before it comes out, or before it happens, I guess, in the situation. Jugyo or shiteiru. Okay, so before the classes where you have calligraphy, and this is our guy we just had up here, Hiramashi-san. He says, Tome hane harai ga kichiri kakeru no ni. So in order to really kind of perfectly or precisely write these characters, 越したことはないとした上で. Now, 越したことはない, and sometimes 越したことはないが, basically means can never, too much. It's kind of an advanced grammar point. You often see this when you're talking about advice. So you generally say whatever is before ni 越したことない, only doing X, nothing's better than just doing X. And then the actual quote, もう少し子供の発達を緩やかに見守ってはどうか. 発達 is progress or development or something. And 緩やか is like slackly or loosely or something here, kind of like kindly or something. And 見守る is to look after something, to pay attention to. はどうか. So he's kind of saying, well, look, the kids are going to go through stages of development. They're not going to be perfect kanji calligraphy writers when they're young, especially in like Yorchien or Shoichi. They're not going to be that good. They're basically not even going to have fine motor control yet. They're still going to be developing those skills, and it's going to take a lot more practice. So there's no point even really teaching them this perfect technique with the tomehane and harai, because they literally can't execute it properly anyway, because they just don't have that fine motor control yet. I mean, it's just kind of like putting a pen in a baby's hand, or maybe expecting a baby to run a race or something. They can walk and they can, jog or something maybe, but they're not going to be able to put their full effort into something because they just don't have that fine motor control yet. So, yeah, just kind of assume that they're not going to be able to do it, that they're not going to execute these things perfectly, but it's more important to just kind of make sure that they're still developing, right? They're still just doing the practice. They're getting better fine motor control over their fingers. And he says, well, how about that? Just kind of allow them to make some mistakes. Don't mark them 0. Just kind of go, oh yeah, we can kind of see that the character is there. You should just work on these little things. と、強調した. And 強調 is to emphasize something. So he's just kind of saying, yeah, you don't want to, first of all, like he said, you don't want to scare kids away basically or make them hate writing kanji because that's really bad. And second of all, they're kind of still developing. So, give them a bit of slack because they're not going to do it perfectly straight away, but with practice, they will get there. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video where we went through this article in detail. Bit of a tricky one, lots of tricky kanji here, and these are kind of academic words to do with calligraphy and things. So if you don't have much background in calligraphy, I mean, not that I really do either, but I did go to a Japanese school for a bit and we did do some calligraphy classes. So I have kind of a basic understanding of some of this stuff. But yeah, I would say pretty tricky. A lot of these words, N2, N1, JLPT, especially some of the references to specific kanji words, which you're not going to come across much in real life, to be honest. But even stuff like this, like kenen, this is a very common JLPT N2 or N1 kanji, I think, because people would not really know how to read this, and they probably read it as ken-nen. But yeah, it's kenen. It's kind of a weird one. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you found this at all useful, again, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. A comment if you've got some ideas for what you'd like me to do. If there's something, in your own Japanese journey that you struggle with, let me know. I'll be happy to do a video on it, and hopefully we can get over this roadblock together. Otherwise, please always do check out my website, acejapanese.com. As I said, I do the weekly blogs there, and I try and pick out interesting things to talk about. You can find a breakdown of this article on there, and this YouTube video will be put there as well as all my contact details if you want to get private lessons done through Zoom. It's also payments, pretty easy. You can just, if you're in Australia, you can do a bank transfer, but generally just do through PayPal. So yeah, it's all pretty straightforward there. But if you have any questions, shoot me an email or leave me a YouTube comment and we can have a chat further. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ja ne!